Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. My name is Mkhwanazi. I will be moderating this session. Welcome to this press conference on gender-based violence and femicide in sacred spaces. I have a number of representatives sitting across the table. They will be giving some input in terms of the discussions that took place yesterday. And you will be, as members of the media, will be welcome to raise questions right at the end of the different presentations. We will start with the representatives of the CRL Rights Commissioners, of the CRL Rights Commission. There are commissioners that are going to be addressing us, starting with the chairperson, followed by the other commissioners. And after that, we are going to be having some input from the victims who have had some experiences, negative and painful experiences, from some of the areas that they were in and some of the institutions that they were part of. After which then we are also going to be having inputs from some organizations that are playing a very supportive role in the whole initiative in helping to fight GBVF in sacred spaces. I'm going to start with the chairperson of the CRL Rights Commission, or I also acknowledge members of the Section 22 committee who are here. I'm aware that others might still be on the way. I appreciate also the time that the journalists have taken to come here. I know that we are competing with the memorial service of the LMC in MZWANELE who drowned and passed away in Mozambique. Some of the colleagues in the media said we will start at this presser and then immediately thereafter we will be rushing to MZWANELE. So we will try not to take much time at this press conference. Thank you very much. I'm going to ask Mkhwanazi Xaluva just to talk to us and lay the foundation in terms of the issues that were discussed yesterday and the reason why we are calling the press here and also going forward. After her, I will be asking the other commissioners to also add.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for coming. I'll just give a broad overview of what we did. Yesterday, we're having a dialogue on GBVF in sacred spaces. When we launched the Section 22 ad hoc committee on the 2nd of October last year, which was held at the Rhema Bible Church, the CRL Rights Commission indicated that it will establish a Section 22 subcommittee that was going to look at GBVF issues in sacred spaces. The victims have always been the priority for the CRL Rights Commission, unapologetically. Hence, this entire process that commenced in April 2025. The Commission held a stakeholders dialogue yesterday, wherein critical issues were raised. One of it being that victims surrender themselves to crime in sacred spaces. We will be given the reasons why and how that happens from some of the people here. As the CRL Rights Commission and activists who fight GBVF, how do we make the system friendly for victims in the religious space? When we talk about sacred spaces, we mean in religious space, including African traditional religion. So this would include what happens in traditional healing spaces, but also what happens across the religions, all of them that we have here in South Africa. There are several abuses that happen. Some of them are financial, spiritual, sexual, emotional, and a violation of their people's human dignity. There are several issues that were raised yesterday. One of them is that men are also victims of GBVF in sacred spaces. We've had, as the CRL Commission, several cases where young men were violated in sacred spaces like the church and traditional healing. More awareness campaigns and dialogues should be done. We agreed yesterday that we should roll out massive awareness campaigns on this issue, and that there must be a support structure for survivors and victims in this special area. The issue of female traditional healers who are also victims of GBVF in their own space was also highlighted. The issue of coercive control and the manipulation of behavior by religious leaders and traditional healers, some, not all. What enables abuses in sacred spaces? These are things that we discussed yesterday, and we agreed that we are going to be taking firm steps moving forward. Emanating from yesterday's deliberations in the GBVF in sacred spaces, and the CRL Commission will implement the following. We are going to have firm and strong research on coercive behavior and control. How does it happen? Because when we are in these circumstances, it's totally different from when we are being violated by someone you may know or may not know, you may have met on the road or on the way to the shop, and they rape you and run away. Under these circumstances, the rapist lives with you, and they rape you perpetually, every day if that's what they want to do, every hour if that's what they want to do. And you are there under immense control. And that for us, we feel we need to dig in there and learn more about what causes this, what makes it possible, why this happens. When people are under these circumstances, how do we empower them when your relative is under this difficult time? How do we empower communities, families, friends, etc. to say, Thoko is living under a traumatic situation there, and how do we make sure that we have enough information to then support the victims. We are going to analyze religious and cultural dynamics and their impact. How does culture and religion create a safe space for perpetrators in the religious sector, both the healing, traditional healing sector and the other religious sector? How does it happen and what is the impact? We'll be analyzing that moving forward. Then the subcommittee consultations with also traditional leaders, we feel we shouldn't leave them behind. The commissioners will explain that this will run parallel with the Section 22 committee, but will be zooming in on GBVF in sacred spaces. We need to do that so that the space can be safe for victims and survivors to come forward. So we will never be in the same room with the other consultations that the Section 22 committee has spoken about. This will have to be a much safer environment to protect the victims. We'll also be meeting with the LGBTQIA plus community to discuss the prejudices they experience in traditional and religious spaces. We discussed this a bit in terms of, in some gestures, if you are an LGBTQIA community, you're seen as being unwell and that you need prayers, even in traditional healing spaces. But also that some in the community, LGBTQIA plus, would then deem themselves as unwell due to what they've been taught, due to what they've been told, and then seek healing themselves. So we need to have that very difficult discussion around this issue. We're looking at engagements with the Department of Education on inclusion of the GBVF in sacred spaces as part of the LO curriculum. If learners are taught at school that this is what a cult looks like, they are likely going to monitor that in their own communities, and if their aunts, their parents, their relatives, their siblings are stuck in a cult, they should be able to help them and say, you know, at school we're told that this thing you are going to is a cult. And I think that will also help in spreading the gospel that we should be vigilant. All of us should be vigilant to protect people against GBVF in sacred spaces. We are going to advocate for GBVF training as part of religious leaders and traditional healers training. We discussed the issue of the curriculum itself in the seminaries. What are they being taught? But also there's the other issue of initiation schools. They have a curriculum there. What is the curriculum in the initiation schools? How do we infuse and make sure that when young men go through initiation, part of what is discussed there is the issue of GBVF? Because if you don't do that, then the product from initiation schools will always be questioned and questionable. The issue of initiation, unfortunately, we then get stuck with how many have died and we don't even move beyond that. A lot of people say there's no law. I heard one of a very senior religious leaders saying the CRL is busy with religious leaders. They are ignoring the whole issue of deaths at initiation school. There's what we call Customary Initiation Act, the CIA. There's an act that regulates initiation schools. They say there's nothing that regulates traditional healers. The reality is there is an act, Traditional Health Professionals Act, but they also have a council. So the Council for Traditional Healers was established like 10 years ago, 8 years ago. And because traditional healers do not mind being regulated, they didn't march every day, they didn't create Facebook pages to object. Although their rights are equal to the rights of Christians. For some reason, Christians think they are more equal than traditional healers. If it was constitutional to have an act to regulate traditional healers, why is it an issue with freedom of religion when the same needs to apply to the other religions? Most people in the traditional healing sector belong to African traditional religion. So their religious rights, are they being violated? Are they not being violated? What is the situation there? All we are saying is that everyone must be equal before the law. Everyone must be equal before the Constitution. So there are people here who will be talking to that. Demand is on the other side. But we're hoping that as we start with this process of GBVF in sacred spaces, we're asking the nation to pay attention to this very important space. And we're hoping to roll out very soon to look at how we can support victims. I've always said this process is not a victimless process. We're there to protect victims. Our priority is how we protect victims. So as the Section 22 rolls out, I'm glad we've got members of the Section 22 committee here. If they can raise their hands, Babu Mweran, Mamkholo, Pastor Wayne, Apostle Nosipo. Okay, those are members of our Section 22 committee. They are also here to take the mandate from the victims themselves. One of the things that has been said, people, is that we're moving too fast. We want you to tell us if we're moving too fast, and you want us to slow down. And you can pass on the message to the members of the Section 22 committee who are here about those that say, why can't this train slow down? And when we tell them that you are saying we're moving too slow, they think we're telling lies. You see, survivors and victims have a different perspective to what religious leaders think. When you felt the trauma and you're living with the trauma, everything is the sooner the better. The others will say, I'm still talking to my people, wait for me, we're still talking. And you keep saying to us, you said you're going to do this thing, so when is it going to happen now? Was it just a story? So today we brought the members of the Section 22 here to hear it from the horse's mouth. So that when others say to you, slow down, then you can tell them, okay, we can slow down, or you can tell them, it's not possible. Those people are telling us something else. So thank you very much, MP.
Thank you so much. I'm going to ask the commissioners in the sequence that they are seated to speak. I'll start with the Commissioner Mkhwanazi.
Thank you so much, Program Director, the Chair, the Section 22 Committee, the Victim Hearing, the organizations that have come to participate here, and everyone else, a very good morning. Much of what I would say has been said by the Chair, but however, as the Commission that protects and promotes the rights of cultural, religious, and linguistic communities, we are mandated to go out there and give some kind of awareness. And in this instance, in the case of sacred spaces, there is a lot that is under the carpet. And therefore people, fall victims of the scourge. And most, sad, the most sad part of it is that it has a psychological effect. Because if you're talking about religion, it's a belief system, right? And any belief system will have rules, tenets, and principles by which we all have to abide. And therefore, people fall victim because of their belief system sometimes. And a belief system becomes consciousness, how you shape your world. You know, we asked ourselves some questions the other day, I think it was Tuesday. How do you go into somebody's psyche? Because it's embedded, it's ingrained in that person's psyche. How do you do it? And we felt like there's going to be need for psychological services as well in here. We have victims here. Some of them, you know, in the Eastern Cape, I happen to have 2 victims from the two different sacred spaces. One from the traditional healers, you know, sacred space, and the other one from the religious, you know, space. And we are faced with those, you know, the trauma, the after effects. And when you look at them, when you communicate or when you interact with them, you find that they have been killed. So how then, as this commission, do we revive those? Hence, there is this conference that has to deal with such issues, and the formation of the subcommittee, which is going to directly deal with this. And this subcommittee is specifically for GBV in sacred spaces, and it arises from the Section 22. By the way, the Section 22 is not only going to be the national body, it is going to spread down to all provinces. There will be committees of the Section 22, subcommittees of the Section 22s, which will be dealing with these different issues. As we speak, the GBF, the GBV and F, you know, subcommittee is going to be going around the whole country in collaboration with the Section 22, some of the Section 22 members, some of the organizations that will be working with. Thank you. I'm going to give over to Commissioner Mkhwanazi, because I think she will say something about this, the role of the plan. So.
Good morning to all attendants. May I please start with my chairperson? Morning to you there, commissioners, the MC, Mr. Mkhwanazi, the activists, the victims, the Section 22 members, the journalists, and everyone attending. I think a lot has been covered already. Mine will be to address a bit the issue of the rollout. We're going to be visiting all provinces, all 9 provinces in the country, trying to reach out to the victims, to the activists, and the survivors. So ours is to protect, as the commission, is to listen out and to hear what people say, and to encourage them to speak out where there is a need for that to happen. We know that not everyone has the guts to reveal what is inside them. They take a little longer. So part of what we need to do is to encourage that happens. So ours is an awareness campaign. Ours is an informative campaign. Ours is an educative process, so people are not easily manipulated. They are not gullible to things that come along. people get exploited financially, where you are told that if you don't produce all your money, or maybe when you just received a pension, if you don't give it all, something will happen to you, and you want to believe that, because they always follow those people that are vulnerable, those people that have got problems. So those are the people that are exploited the most. So all of us as citizens, as communities of South Africa, we have a big responsibility to protect one another, to protect the very needy people. So we need to be alert, and I think it is also the duty of everyone to alert us. When you come across something that you feel is not going right, don't doubt to call us and to alert us about that need. So part of our responsibility is to fill that void, to be protective, to take the initiative, to do what we can to improve the situation in the country. Thank you very much.
A very good morning to the chair and her commissioners, our activists and victims. To the section 22, good morning, stakeholders, officials, members of the media, greetings. I think the chair and commissioners have stressed on this very much important issue, that the GBVF is indeed a pandemic. It is indeed a national disaster, and it is an acknowledgement that the killings of our women, our children, as well as men, is not only a social crisis, but it is an urgent call to action. And that is what we are, as the subcommittee of the Section 22, are going to embark on. Sacred sites are places of safety, of spiritual cleansing, of restoration, of deliverance. These are sites where people should feel safe at all times. And if you are not safe with your gobela at your ndomba, if you are not safe within the church, where will you be safe? So we say that no one should feel scared in the country. No one should feel as if they have nowhere to go. GBV is a reality. It is a demon that needs to be captured and arrested. I think to delay this particular rollout plan will be a miscarriage of justice. Therefore, as the subcommittee, we then have to hit the ground running with regard to our engagement, as per what the commissioners have alluded to say that as much as we have the Section 22 that will be on the ground, we also are going to have the subcommittee. Now, the subcommittee is inclusive of us as commissioners, as well as the victims and activists. We will be traveling across the 9 provinces within the country, acknowledging that we have hot spots within the provinces. But because we understand that GBV is a demon in the country, we are going to cover all the 9 provinces, spending about a week within a province. And the beauty about these dialogues and engagement is that as much as the Section 22 will be busy engaging with regards to the Charter of Self-Regulatory and also engaging with regard to the Code of Conduct, as the subcommittee, we will be on the ground engaging with victims, with survivors and activists, covering the the stories. I think our purpose is not to open old wounds, but to have a book of reference to say, look, as a country, we do have some religious practitioners who have left wounds, who have left scars among these victims. So something needs to be done. What needs to be done forever. And that will be that when only we can have a legislation that says these are the conducts of a religious practitioners. Because I think as a subcommittee, we will be going on the ground to capture these voices, to understand the root causes, but most importantly, to also understand the patterns. All of us here want to wake up in a country where we do not hear about stories of exploitations, stories of physical, emotional, and sexual abuse. We want to wake up in a country where everyone can, as per the Constitution of the Republic of South Africa, exercise their rights. Because the Bill of Rights, Chapter 2, is quite clear when it highlights that everyone in the country, whether you're Umtasana, whether you are a member of a congregation, you have a right. I thank you.
Thank you so much, Chairperson and Commissioners. I'm going to move to Cheryl. After her, it's going to be Erika. And then after Erika, it's going to be Sikle. Then I'll come to Daniela and Demand.
Thank you. Good morning to everybody. Thank you so much for being here, to all of you, to those who have experienced what we have experienced, and especially to those who haven't, because I don't think you go out of your way to hear stories like this. It's very difficult to hear. So thank you, especially to those who haven't been through it but are trying to make positive change. We had a discussion yesterday, and these are just some of my inputs as someone who has experienced abuse in a sacred space, in a church, especially in the context of Christianity. The challenge with abuse in sacred spaces, like Chair was saying earlier, is that it is not as straightforward as, being grabbed or being held at gunpoint, being pointed out with a knife, and being violated. It is far more insidious. It is gradual, and it is essentially being taken hostage of in your mind. Now, when something as straightforward as being grabbed happens, you obviously have the good sense to, more often than not, immediately go to a station and report. But this is so insidious that you don't even have that thought. That thought doesn't even come to mind. This is not just the hijacking of one's body, but it is the hijacking of the mind. If someone or something that is outside of yourself controls your mind, that means that you can't make decisions. Now, if you think about the depth of that, you can't make decisions. Not independently, anyways. That person or the thing that is outside of you basically is what tells you how you're allowed to feel on any given day, whether or not you're allowed to eat or sleep on any given day. It tells you ultimately what you can do and informs your capabilities, giving no mind to any prior belief of what you were capable to do before. Now someone else is controlling you and telling you what you are capable of, what you must feel, what you must do, what you can and can't do, and ultimately what you're allowed to be done to you. It is a systematic bulldozing of what you believe to have known about yourself in the past. It bulldozes your relationships with your friends and family. Bulldozes everything that you believe to have known about yourself before and takes hostage of your very autonomy, basically. My suggestion, I think an immediate kind of step to action that could be taken to kind of dismantle this is regulating the amount of time that people spend in these institutions, in churches. I'm not saying don't worship, I'm saying if one individual or one institution controls so much of your time, then that means they control your mind ultimately. No one individual should have so much control of your days, because that is what enforces or reinforces indoctrination. These things need time. Indoctrination involves repeated chants. You know, I'm sure we've all seen documentaries, repeated tapes, reinforcing the miracle working power, reinforcing the belief that one individual has like VIP tickets to heaven. It doesn't make sense. And so I think that the time that people are allowed to spend, or leaders are allowed to keep people in church, should be looked at closely. People need to go outside and not lose their grasp on reality. Touch some grass, interact with other people. Because the more time you spend in one place, I mean, anyone here, if you spend 1 week or 2 weeks, Monday to Sunday in the church, that your thinking capacity is altered. Your belief system changes, the way you view yourself and the world changes. So we need to really regulate how much time people are giving to these places. Never mind the workers, that's a different thing entirely. But how much time is being spent there? Are people being allowed to work, to function? Because you can't neglect the rest of life just because of this one institution or because one person feels like it. If someone feels like everyone should spend 7 hours in the church today, it doesn't make any sense. Thank you.
Hi everyone, and thank you so much for being here today and for having me here as well. I speak to you today as a survivor of abuse in a sacred space as well. I was a teenager and then a young woman, groomed by my religious counselor at the church of my childhood, where they had now titles of pastor, as if it's sweets without any training. In this church, we were also taught as young women what our place was, and our place was to be subservient to men. We were told very clearly that we are stumbling blocks, that we cause men to sin, and so in that we were encouraged to shrink ourselves so as to not become a stumbling block to a man. In this context, you put vulnerable young women and girls in a room with a man who has power over her, and this is religious counseling that is happening, and there is bound to be abuse. My religious counselor groomed me over the course of many years, and I eventually grew so uncomfortable. I knew something was wrong, but I thought I was the problem. I was the sinner because I'm the woman, right? I did go to the leader of the church and I spoke to him about it. He called me a Jezebel and a Delilah, and he did nothing. Sometime later, this same counselor waited until a friend of mine was 18 and then he raped her. And when this friend of mine went to the same leader of the church, he said to her what he said to me and what they said to many other young girls and boys who were sexually abused and raped. He said, repent of the sin of making a man of God stumble. Ask God to forgive you. And then speak of this to nobody, not even your mother. It took me a while to understand that what I'd experienced and witnessed was abuse. And once I did, I started speaking out. I had left the church by then. I was in my early 20s. And when I started speaking out, I got a lot of backlash from Christians who said, "You are undermining the work of God by speaking out. Why are you bringing this into the public space? Why are you bringing this into the media? This should be dealt with internally." Dealt with internally, really. I've come to understand that the only people served by silence are the perpetrators. The only people served by so-called internal processes are the perpetrators. And so I have been speaking out for 3 decades. And people ask me, "Erica, seriously, time to move on. Surely, can't you just leave the past in the past and move on with your life?" I'm sure you've heard it, I'm sure you've heard it. Leave it in the past. And you know what? No. We will not leave it in the past while our past is the present for children and women and young people today. That is when we will leave it in the past. We would all love to move on with our lives. We built beautiful lives for ourselves. Why do we still speak? Because it's not in the past, it's in the present, and we know it. Sorry, I will wrap up, but I do want to say that over the years I tried to understand what happened to me and what had led my parents to be in a place that was this abusive. And as I started learning and reading and understanding, the one core element is coercive control. And you've heard about that. Now, South Africa's amended Domestic Violence Act acknowledges coercive control in domestic violence situations. It acknowledges, it allows for the granting of protection orders even without a single bruise. And that is such a huge step, and well done, South Africa. But we need to expand this, because that dynamic happens not only in a home, it happens in our schools, and it happens in our churches, in our missions, in our sacred spaces. And we have to start understanding, and we have to start educating people that isolating, shaming, controlling people, that is all elements of coercive control. It is well known and accepted in academic circles even that there's a BITE model. And the BITE model, and this is mainly for cultic groups, but you know what, these all fall under that in some way or another. And it is a group or a person who controls someone else's behavior, the information that flows to them and flows from them, their thoughts and their emotions. It's a very simple outline, the BITE model. And we've all been victims of men of God who they call themselves that, we don't. And the power of our collective stories is it's not a single church, it's not a single pastor, it's not a single space that is problematic. Hear us when we tell you that these are problematic spaces, because there's also the element of I don't want to go to hell. I don't want to anger God. And if I speak out against this man of God, I am speaking out against God. And I'm consigning myself to hell. When I ran away at the age of 21, I did so fully believing that I was going to go to hell. But I couldn't stay. And I cannot stay silent, and I won't. To the media, I want to ask you, you know the power of language, right? You work with language, you work with words, you know how powerful it is. A pastor who uses his power to obtain power and control over a congregant, that's not an affair. That's an abuse of power. By calling it an affair, you're minimizing the crime and you're minimizing the trauma of the victim. While I'm on that topic, there is no such thing as child porn. It is child abuse, sexual material. Porn is created by consensual adults. A child, kiddie porn, we minimize the harm and the crime with the words we use to describe things. And I want to appeal to the media, please, please, take care of the words in which you report on things. Do not perpetuate the harm of GBVF in your reporting. Just please. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody, and good morning, all protocol observed. CRL Commission, the media houses that are here, and different pastoral heads. And firstly, I want to say well done to us victims who are now victors. I know that I'm one of the main people that gets cyberbullied and smeared upon by churches and the religious sector. They will want to say, no, this one was not abused at the hands of pastors. She was seducing pastors. These are the things that are said by religious sectors about me. And the most amazing thing is that I've been sharing my story for over 12 years now, consistently so. And when the BBC documentary dropped in 2024, 2 years ago, I felt, thank you, Jesus, finally, because people thought I was lying, but we had women from all over the world speaking their story. I've always maintained that I personally am not against the church, and I'm not against the religious sector, because I still go to church. It's just that I no longer go to those fireproof churches that say Papa, Daddy, because for me, maybe it's a trauma response, so I still go to church. I need to emphasize that the CRL Commission is not saying they want to give churches a curriculum, regulate them, and they must preach the same thing. Definitely not. I think the misunderstanding is there. They're not saying that. The CRL Commission, with people who have been victims, and with the help of the Section 22 committee, which I see has now been amended, there are women within that committee, which is a big, yes, it does deserve a clap. And what the CRL Commission is saying is that the religious sector needs to be held accountable at some point. If there's an allegation against you within the church, and they take it to the committee of the church, but the victim feels that they are not being heard, they feel that they are being gaslighted, where do they run to? Yes, you will say to us there are police stations, they must go open cases, etc., etc. But our police officers also are not trained enough to understand what grooming is. They're not trained enough to understand how they are able to coerce you into doing things. Because some will say to you, when he called you, what did you do? You are going to say, yes, I went. They said, Daddy is calling me, I went. Then they'll say, why did you go? Because they don't understand that. So the CRL Commission wants to create a board that's going to say, should you not be helped in your church, run to this particular board that is going to help you to hold your alleged pastor, prophet, whatever that you call them, accountable. And within that board, I believe, should it be cases that need psychological intervention, it will be there. But if it's cases that need the police, it must happen. Our president, Honorable President Ramaphosa, before the G20 and during the G20, he pronounced that gender-based violence and femicide is a national disaster. It's saddening that nothing has been rolled out since the G20 has left. And why am I mentioning this? It's because when you look at the stats, 85% of the population in our country identifies as the religious sector. Faith religious sectors are viewed as playing a pivotal role in combating gender-based violence and femicide. So for me, it baffles my mind to say, if you are going to smear campaign Sihle CBC, create AI videos, I'm talking to myself because I'm seeing it happen and I've seen it happen. If you're going to create AI videos, change the narrative, take clips and clip them together to suit your narrative, what is it that you're hiding? Because the CRL is not saying we're going to say here's a curriculum, all churches must preach like this. They just want a board of accountability. Look what happened. I was a victim, Erica was a victim, Cheryl was a victim. Yes, it's reported to the police. What happened then? But if there's a body to be accountable to, if you're a doctor, if you're a lawyer, you've got a body that you account to for your mishaps and non-behaving properly. And why will we never stop talking? It's because there's under-reporting of gender-based violence cases within the church. And the under-reporting happens because of the fear that is embedded in you by these men of God, where they say, should you talk, you will go to hell, or whatever they say to want to manipulate and scare you, and there's under-reporting. I want to emphasize that even our pastors in the religious sector and sacred spaces, Department of Social Development, hand in hand with CRL, must provide adequate training for them regarding gender-based violence and femicide. Because sometimes you're a man of God or a woman of God and you're not trained to understand what it is. There's a thin line. You're not trained to understand. So I believe the board that the CRL is creating is a board that's also going to be available to say, we're going to bring experts on board. We're going to train our church leaders, our religious sector, to say, this is GBV. These are things that you must look out for in the church. Avoid certain things so that you don't land into hot water. A study was done in KwaZulu-Natal, and it found that approximately 55.38% respondents are GBV victims within the church. 55.38 in the place of worship. And it also says that some religious leaders, right, when we talk about the abuse of power, why is there under-reporting? That's because some religious leaders and pastors who have been implicated as perpetrators, they use their positions of authority to silence the victims. I heard one pastor the other day who said, if somebody comes to church and they say, Father, I have sinned, I killed someone or I raped a child, the man of God just needs to say, I'm praying for you, your sins are gone, and that's it. No. That is why we're saying we want this board. Because if somebody comes to a pastor and confesses such, yes, pray for them. But while you're praying for them, call the cops, call the police, because they need to be accountable. Pastors always teach about seed time and harvest time, right? So they've planted, now they must harvest. It doesn't mean that your prayers won't help them in prison, but it's time for them to harvest based on their behavior. And finally, reports suggest that up to 80% of women within the church have experienced some form of gender-based violence and gender inequality within the church. These are things that are happening, and people will say, they are angry, these ones, that's why they're doing this. I've heard people saying, I'm getting money from the CRL Commission. I don't even remember getting 5 cents. I've heard people saying, I'm in their payroll. No, we are not going to remain silent, because as we're sitting here, there is a Cheryl Zondi somewhere now in 2026. There is an Erica somewhere now in 2026. There is a CBC somewhere in a church that is experiencing what we went through, but they cannot speak. They're afraid to speak because chances are they'll be silenced. They'll be isolated from the church. Because like Cheryl said, the more time you spend in a place, it's the more time they're able to change your mentality. and you're able to believe that, oh my God, if I don't listen to the prophet, I'm going to hell because prophet is the mouthpiece of God. And my final plea, men and women of God, we are not against the church. We are not against the religious sector. We are just merely saying it happened to us. Help us find ways so that it doesn't continue. And those that are fighting against us, it's because maybe they don't understand that the CRL is not saying here's a curriculum. We just want to create a body of accountability. And if you're still fighting for that body of accountability to be established, what are you hiding? As a man or a woman of God, what are you hiding? What is your fear? That somebody in your church may go to this board that holds you accountable and then something may come out. Because what we've experienced is that victims within the church also experience secondary victimization. We've seen pastors who get arrested, they get bail, and then they are back on the pulpit on Sunday. And when they preach, you are the point of reference every time they preach, which results in you leaving the church and you deny Christ. So that is why this board is there, so that they can train the pastors about gender-based violence and femicide, number 1. 2, hold them accountable. If it is alleged, until it's proven you're not guilty, don't hold the microphone. Let somebody else do it too, so that secondary victimization must stop happening. I thank you.
I'm now going to ask Daniela to give some insights as someone working for an organization that provides support. Will be followed by Dimba Mdimand.
Thank you and greetings. I feel like this is a moment where, in fact, we are standing on sacred ground. I would request just a moment to acknowledge these 3 courageous women and all courageous women who have suffered abuse in their sacred spaces, from whatever background they come. As well as men, as well as people who don't fit the narrow heterosexual mode. Let us just stop and listen. Thank you. I'm representing not an organization, but a coalition of individuals, organizations, groups in various faiths, because we work interfaith. We're a collective. We also work as a secretariat to a national collective called the Faith Action to End Gender-Based Violence. You can find both on the web. I want to say that it's important to acknowledge how bad it gets. But it's also important to acknowledge that a lot of the abuse is hidden. A lot of the abuse is unconscious and people don't even know what is happening. Increasingly, globally, there is a concept called spiritual abuse, which underlies all other forms of abuse. And not just in sacred spaces, I need to say. Because those who have been indoctrinated by certain teachings and understandings of scripture, the sacred texts, and of the basic tenets of their belief system, They go and reproduce it in their communities when they prepare the young woman for marriage. What do the makotis, the old women, do when they are actually helping to prepare the bride for marriage? What happens in initiation schools? What happens in all these different environments? So in many ways, I want to say, if we are people of faith and we've not thought about these teachings and the things that we blindly follow that undermine the equality and justice and integrity of every single person, we are all complicit. And if we stand up and we fight and we undermine the integrity of people who have the courage to stand up, we need to look at ourselves. Not just what are we hiding, but why haven't we been thinking? Why haven't we allowed ourselves to admit that maybe we come from a tradition that is not just holy? Sorry, that was completely not part of what I wanted to say. So as we will speak out South Africa and the Faith Action Collective, we are survivors, we are activists, theologians who are revisiting the sacred texts. We are leaders who have begun to recognize that there is a problem. And all kinds of people who work in their own spaces as well as together. And I want to acknowledge those people. And I want to acknowledge that the terrible, awful things we've heard about today are not the only things that are happening in the faith sector. And there is this movement that is growing, and we invite more people to be part of that movement, where we really do listen and take care, learn from one another, and find ways to begin to transform. So I would like us to acknowledge this process as historic. This is a process of listening. This is the first time in this country and in any of our faith sectors, maybe not all of our faith sectors, where we are saying survivor voices are paramount. Let us listen, let us learn, and my understanding is that the outcomes of what this subcommittee is going to be learning are going to be fed to the Section 22 committee, to be fed into the Code of Conduct, into the Charter, because who better to understand what is needed in the Code of Conduct and in the Charter than the people who have suffered the most. So, but part of that, I do want to request the subcommittee to also recognize, as you've seen here, to share one's experiences is costly. And to share and to bring up all that stuff, and every time I'm a survivor from many years ago, but even still now, sometimes when I talk about my story, the tears come, because we never completely heal. And so the subcommittee, when you do go and the commissioners go into the provinces and go and listen, please make sure there is psychological support there, because people will need it. And those of us who are faith leaders, who might be afraid of people in our congregations going there, let us switch that around and let us see how we can support them. Let us see what structures might be needed in our churches and in our spaces, as has been happening among the over 900 members and partners that we have, as we all speak out, and the Faith Action Collective. One of whom, the chairperson, is sitting here, Nompilo Mkhwanazi, who is the chairperson of the Pepisa Survivors Network in KZN, whose dream is to have a national survivors network, imagine. And the one thing that she said, the Pepisa Survivors Network are on our board to guide us and lead us. And one thing that has often come back to us is when she said, when you are abused, your spirit is attacked. That's why we need our faith communities and our faith leaders. How much worse when we are attacked by those same leaders? Where do we go then? So, I want to close really by appealing to the Section 22 committee and every single faith leader. Allow the voices of survivors to transform you, to help you understand what is needed, to stop defending yourself. We are all human. We all need to be accountable. We can't just claim that we're only accountable to God. That is a form of spiritual abuse. We are accountable to one another, to our people, and actually to our government who represents, and our constitution who represents individuals. I would like to invite you to look at the work that's being done through We Will Speak Out South Africa on the website, as well as the Faith Action Collective to end gender-based violence. See where you can join. See what support you need in your own spaces, because this is really difficult work. Anyone who stands up to speak and to challenge and to say we can't carry on like this, we are not doing this right, we need to be answerable to God and our people, inevitably gets discredited. Not just survivors when they get up. We know that from what's happened to our chairperson and many other commissioners and other people. So we need each other. So let's work together. I want to just share with you, and to end, a prayer, a pledge of commitment that we say at any meeting, anywhere in the country, based on any faith background, to remind us why we are doing this work, and to remind us of the nuances. The faith sector has messed up, and I would say maybe because of the numerical dominance of a Christian, or maybe there's other reasons. But as Christians, we really do have to take responsibility. And yet, there's so much potential for what we can do and what we must do if we are true to our calling. So this is our interfaith prayer and statement of commitment. And I'm going to end with that, and I'm going to ask you again to stop and to be open and to pray this with me. Gender-based violence is unacceptable, inexcusable, and intolerable in all its manifestations. Yet, we have chosen that we confess that we have sometimes chosen not to see or tolerated gender-based violence or perpetrated it. We've been collaborators and co-conspirators against the very essence of our creation. From our platform within local communities, people of faith potentially play a vital role in raising awareness, advocating for survivors' rights and against impunity, holding perpetrators accountable, and challenging harmful gender norms and gender injustices without fear or favor. Yet we confess that we've often been complicit by our silence, our inaction, our misuse of sacred texts, and our rigid structures that silence or exclude diversity. Thus, we have undermined God's image in all people. Therefore, and let's say this together in your heart with me, therefore, we commit to standing up, speaking out, and taking decisive action, and to being accountable to survivors, to each other, and to God. Thank you.
Thank you. Timothy Obudin.
Ngiyabonga Program Director, lithuba lomniketa lona ngivusele kakhulu, Chairperson of the Commission, Mkhwanazi Xaluva, commissioners present, section 22 committee members present, victims akhona, organizations and stakeholders, the media house is present, buholi babalaphi bendabuko lobukhona in the midst today. We've been working very close with the commission for the past decade as community council, singabalaphi bendabuko, advocating specifically for the GBVF in sacred spaces. So I also want to reflect yesterday, also to appreciate and acknowledge the work of the commission. For us as the THP sector, I think I need to start also by putting a disclaimer. We also form part and we are contributing as the sector. GBV, let's begin directly or indirectly so. In this issue, let's begin GBVF or what the commission seeks to establish. So our point of departure is that we need proper diagnosis of the causes of GBVF before we can even speak of the remedy or solutions to the problem. So the THP sector directly contributes to the causes of the GBVF through some of the remedies, e.g. amadliso, ama-love potion, or pedaminanedwa, ibambelelo. Those are the things that are very common in our practice. And the statistics says over 87% of Abantu of South Africa, when they need primary health care services, they come to us first. So that means now we are at the reception Abantu. So it means Abantu who should play a very key and pivotal role, especially in championing this issue of ilokuzana GBV. You must also remember, Program Director, that these remedies are not lifetime things. So you need to from time to time. So once the concoction ipela in your system, then that person upenduka lesilwane lesi ongasazi ukuthi siyini, and they become very violent. So, and also you also know ukuthi we do have our institutions, siyathwasisa, we admit our patients. So that is also where abanye abantu they get victimized khona. Ogobela kunalento le ebungomeni asiyazi ukuthi ibuyaphi, because it is not supposed to be happening in our sector. However, it is happening where they are. It's a dirty norm. I will say it is a norm because it has been made to be understandable in our sector, to say you need to sleep with your mentor or ugobela, which is then is not allowed in our sacred sector. So also in most cases, our victims, they only realize that they are being victims at a very later stage when most of the damage has been done. So why is it that? It is because of the system of indoctrination eyenzakalayo. So whatever I say goes. So it is a system, and like the victims have said, once you are doing everything, and I want to also state, there's a very thin line between a cult and the traditional practice. Because once you look at the clear definition of a cult, it will tell you what is something to be done consistently. So that is actually what is being done. That is why it is normal because my mentor has said so. So those are the things that also appreciate what the government has done also to establish for us the THP Act 22 of 2007, which then is a regulatory body for THPs, which will make their life easy for victims and perpetrators to hold people accountable. So we need a proper sectoral code of conduct as the Bible that will allow and assist us in ensuring that we bring and preserve the dignity our sector deserves. So the formation of the subcommittee, I think it is the new dawn of the long-standing issue of the GBV, which has been declared a national disaster. Another sacred space, and we touched a very little on it yesterday, is sector your mama abahloli intombi. iy'ntombi ziyahlukumezeka kakhulu also lapho konomehlo. I think it is also some sector or another safe space that we need to look into as this subcommittee is going to be established, also because there's an act that is there for social development. So we must ensure that act is adhered to, so that we ensure Lokhola Wentombe becomes the safe space that is supposed to be. And then I think also it will assist having the traditional health practitioners or the sector on its own championing the subject of this matter. It will give a clear diagnosis to the problem and provide lifelong solutions. It is very saddening, as I conclude, that sacred spaces that the perpetrators, after they get bail, they go back to the crime scene and create more victims while protected by the freedom of religion. So as the THP sector, we want to give confidence to the people of South Africa that our country shall be a better and a safe and a sacred space for all. So because it is very important, we must ensure at all times, as the sector or the people abathenjwe ngabantu, we do what God has placed us to do. So I really want to commend lo msebenzi lo wendiwe kusukela itolo kufikela nyalo. Ngiyabonga.
Thank you so much to all the panelists. We have had some technical challenges in terms of the link, but we will be uploading the entire recording after we are done. We also acknowledge the request from some of the journalists who had to leave to go and join the memorial service. I'm going to ask whether they have some questions of clarity from some of the media houses that are here. Can I get an indication if there are questions that you would like to raise to the panelists? Okay. Thank you so much. I think we are covered. I see Pastor, you have a question? No. Okay. Can you maybe take this mic? Okay.
Thank you very much. When I walked in the room this morning, I knew that we don't have the liberty of freestyling as pastors anymore in how we speak, in how we conduct ourselves. It's a very heavy morning. Dear victims and survivors of abuse, Cheryl, Erica, Sike, and all those out there that are still suffering in silence and yet to gain the courage to come out. I want to take this moment to express my deepest and most sincere apologies to each and one of you. The pain and the suffering you have endured within what should be a sacred and safe space is profoundly unacceptable. It is heartbreaking to know that the places meant for healing, support, and community have instead caused harm and betrayal. I acknowledge the trust that was placed in these places, in these spaces, trust that was shattered by the actions of individuals who failed to protect and uphold the core values of love, care, and respect. Your stories are important, and your voices matter. I am truly sorry for the injustices you have faced and the lasting impact they have had on your lives. Moving forward, as Section 22, we are committing to actively listen to your experiences, amplifying your voices, and working diligently to ensure that our sacred spaces are genuinely safe for everyone. especially women and children. This includes implementing rigorous safeguards, fostering a culture of accountability, and continuously educating ourselves on the importance of respect and protection in our communities. Together, we can rewrite the narrative surrounding our sacred spaces. We'll transform them into environments characterized by compassion, support, and vigilance against abuse. We pledge to be part of this change, starting with you in solidarity and united in our efforts to protect and uplift one another. Thank you for your strength and your resilience. It is our hope that with collective effort, we can reclaim the sacredness of these spaces and create a beautiful story marked by healing, empowerment, and trust. May God help us and may God strengthen us. Thank you.
Thank you, Pastor Wayne, and thank you, members of the Section 22 Committee, for your response and your commitment to help find the solutions to the challenges that have been outlined since we started the press conference. I think we have come to the chair would like to make a comment. After that, we will then close the press conference. Thank you.
Thanks a lot from the Section 22 Committee. And we truly acknowledge your commitment to this process. And I must say, which I didn't say earlier, this is a very difficult process. And I'm sure being cyberbullied, well, because people don't want to be held to account. You are being cyberbullied because you were victims. That makes it unpardonable. The people who call themselves Christians create these Facebook pages of hatred and extreme bullying and AI videos and cropped videos and all sorts of filth, I must say, that is un-Christ-like. When the people who claim to be religious leaders do what they do, I saw what they did with Usihle immediately after the launch of the Section 22. They went back and scrapped and they did AI and portrayed her as she wasn't a victim, she was actually seducing these people. There's no hatred beyond that. It's the ultimate in hatred by people who call themselves leaders, who say they are Christians, who say they are protecting freedom of religion. What kind of freedom is this that says you can say anything about anyone anytime? It's pure undiluted hatred. And I'm not going to be like, doing X and Y. You need to go to the South African Church Defenders Facebook page. There you'll know what hatred looks like. There you'll know what ungodly behavior looks like. There you'll know what pure lies look like. They're proud of their achievement. But the only thing we've ever wanted was that people must be held accountable. It's all about ethics, accountability. Why is it so painful? I must say, I'm so proud of the Section 22 Committee that has stood up in spite of the insults, even coming from the SY chairperson, directed at Section 22 Committee members. The war we're engaging in is unusual. Nothing like this has ever been seen in this country. I know when back 2017, 2018, were doing something. But the level of pushback this time is 500 times more. We need to remember one thing that keeps me moving. It's the victims, the survivors. These 3 women here made it all worthwhile. When the insults come, when the fight back campaign comes from all levels, I think of these 3 and I say, we owe them. Their pain must stay with us. Because if we walk away from the pain, we'll start saying, this is too difficult. I can't do this anymore. I always say, if it's not difficult for them, it cannot be too difficult for me. So we hold on to the pain, my 3 warriors here. We pray every day that you heal. Healing takes time. It takes years and years before you heal. And you say, take your time. But those that are out there, the insights with everything, we can say to them, you will get tired at some point because the train is moving and it's not going to stop. There is space for us to start doubting the road. We need to say, we are on course. Whatever it takes, whatever you do, whatever insults, we'll identify them as insults. It becomes an insult because it's untrue. That's why it's an insult. If you say to me, Thoko Mkhwanazi Xaluva, it's not an insult. But once you say people must wave their underwear in the air, you must know you've reached another level and I'm not going there with you. You're going there alone. And I think let's keep it in our hearts and in our minds that, as Pastor Wayne has said, there are still those out there who are still stuck, who are afraid of moving out of this thing where their mind has been taken away. Well, Cheryl said that, you know, in all those churches that are doing strange things, you spend unbelievable hours there. You're there Monday to Sunday, you stay there, you move in as a boarding school type thing. And we're saying, Commissioner Mosala, the issue of definition of cults is urgent. We need to start saying, here's a checklist of a cult. If we're in this situation, know that it's quacking like one, it swims like one, it is one. So I would like to say, let's move forward. And I'd like to say to the Section 22 committee members who are here, we understand it's difficult. It's risky. At some point, it becomes unsafe. But we're saying, let's try by all means to keep moving and to keep moving fast as we remember these faces. They cannot wait any longer. The others who are out there cannot wait any longer. The others who are saying, why is the CRL rushing this thing? Why can't they slow down? Tell them that the victims said they can't wait any longer. Find a solution and find it fast. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Chair. Thanks all the members of the panel. Thanks to everyone who has participated in this press. Thanks for the journalists that remained, not that others have left. We've come to the end of this.